Yes, no? Sorry, you said 1 minute. So, okay. Kill the noisemaker. All right, so we'll call the regular council meeting of Tuesday, December 10th to order. Just before we get going, I'd like to acknowledge that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Admin?
Technology update. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Councillor Hendricks.
Your worship, so moved.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Tonight, we have no items on our open forum, which brings us to the consent agenda. I move that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Item 5A, regular council meeting minutes of November the 26th. Item 5B, special committee of the whole meeting minutes of December the 3rd. Item 10A, Councillor Stout's report. Item 10B, Councillor Daneluik's report. And item 12A, a letter from the Minister of Transportation, Rick McIver, in relation to automated traffic enforcement technology. Discussion on the motion. All right. Seeing none. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. All right, there are no public hearings. There are no registered presentations, which brings us to business item 8A, adoption of the 2020 interim budget.
Budget for capital projects approved in 2019. Background is the MGA requires municipalities to adopt a capital and operating budget. The MGA also allows municipalities to approve an interim budget. Rationale on this is these items allow admin to maintain services as well as continue work on capital projects until the 2020 budget is approved in the spring. At this time, it is administration's recommendation that council adopt an interim budget of equal to 1/4 of the 2019 operating budget, which equates to $13,112,300, pending approval of the 2020 operating budget. Also, that council approve the carry forward of incomplete capital projects approved in the 2019 capital budget, or that council provide alternative direction to administration. This time, I open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Hendricks.
Your question to the presenter. With respect to the Community Events Committee budget, just want to ensure that the Family Day event, the City Celebration event, and Town and Country Days event, the budget for those are built into this interim budget. Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, as those would be service levels defined in the 2019 budget, the 1/4 would be, the calculation of those would be in that 1/4. So hence my concern. So the City Celebration package was not under the former Promotions Committee budget. It was a standalone event. So I just want to make sure that monies for that City Celebration event that's now under the Community Events Committee has been allocated in this interim budget to allow for planning. I can double check unless you can confirm.
the money's in there.
Oh, yeah. So like before those within that. Okay, so because the city that was under a standalone event prior to this, going under the community events committee, it was a $30,000 ask last time. So I just want to make sure it's in here now. So thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Stout.
Mr. Daneluik, the revenue from automated traffic enforcement, the photo radar, appears as a revenue item on the interim budget. Is it what's the classification? I'm sorry, I'm behind myself here. Does that appear as part of licenses, permits, and fines, or somewhere else as a revenue?
Through your worship, Councillor, so yes, it would.
Thank you. Does the cut that they take from automatic traffic enforcement, and I think 1st of January, and change it to does that affect the revenue? If this is just a quarter of the revenue from last year, then would that, or has it already?
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, the quarter is done at a high level. For those specific items, they're not adjusted for, but the operating budget for 2019 to the 2020 items like that are not adjusted for in this.
There's some in cases like that where
through your worship, Councillor Stout, in that instance, it wouldn't be to adjust for in this interim budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is about carry forward, if it's not out of order to go to that second. Second. Just wondering if there's a list of those capital projects, or you could perhaps tell us what they are, because what I have in the package, unless I've missed it, is just the operating. And I think we're approving tonight the budget. Correct, please let me know.
We actually have we're doing two motions tonight. The interim budget equal to one quarter of the operating budget. Second motion to approve the carry forward of the incomplete capital projects.
My point is, second part, there's nothing here. Here is a consolidated budget, which usually means capital is included with operating, but I don't know if that's the case. So, Mr. Jablanc.
Through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, capital is included in the list of projects to be carried forward. Those will be identified at the budget workshop in January, as they typically are, and then the actual carry forward amounts are typically confirmed in April when the budget is amended. This motion is in place to allow, construction on the rec center, for instance, to be continued past December 31st, as well as other.
Sure.
If I understand correctly, this council would have an opportunity to see the list. I'm sorry, I just haven't got it on my screen here. Of which capital is being carried forward? That is incomplete or not?
Through your worship, Councillor Stout, that listing is not included in the attachment, but the cat second column.
CEO?
The projects, and yeah, I guess we could have listed them, and we can bring that back if you want to, if you don't want to approve it. These are already pre-approved projects for 2019. Just they're partially in progress, and as continue to pay the bills after January 1, we need approval of that capital. So these are all pre-approved for 2019 during last year's budget workshop.
My question is coming from is just that if there's maybe how you 19 these projects.
The anomaly, these were to be completed close to completion. That's correct.
Yes. I would like to see that at some point. I won't hold up the motion for that, but I would definitely like to see that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Any further questions from members of council? Okay, so I will one that council adopt an interim budget equal to 1/4 of the 2019 operating budget, $112,300, pending approval of the 2020 operating budget. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? That carries unanimously. Is there a member to move the council approve the carry forward of incomplete capital projects approved in the 2020 budget? Councillor Daneluik.
So move, your worship. Thank you.
Discussion on the motion. All right, seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBlanco. So that brings us to item 8B, 2020 Council Board and Committee Public Appointments. Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to council and public. Appointing citizens to serve on city boards and committees strengthens citizen engagement in the community, which is a focus in council's strategic plan. Council is required to appoint members to several boards and committees upon expiration of each board and committee's respective terms, or if a board member resigns for any of their respective terms. Tonight, administration is making recommendations to fill the current vacancies in the following committees: the Community Events Committee, the Beaumont Municipal Library Board, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, the Recreation Parks, and receive any applications for the Beaumont Committee.
Questions from members of council on the appointments? Councillor Van Nieuwkerk.
No, thank you, Worship, through to administration. Just with respect to would you be able to speak to the different terms? The Grant Tully would end on December 31, 2020, Ross 31, 2021, Martin 31, 22, and then 21, and then 22 again. And there's rationale for that, but just if you could speak to that, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk. So the reason for that is it's a newly committee that council's created, and so we have staggering terms. So that's how that would work, is to ensure that you don't have all of your new members expiring at the same time. So it kind of staggers and keeps that continuity in the committee.
Perfect. Yeah, you betcha. And I knew the answer to that question. I just wanted to make sure everyone else understood that and caught that, because if they were all the same year, then the whole new committee ends all at the same time, and that's not quite what we would want. So that staggered approach is why we need to be there, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure who to direct the question to, perhaps the CAO, but what's the next step with the CCBCC?
Well, that was a question I had myself too, because if that committee is not having members, perhaps it's time to do something with that committee.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Barnhart. Only having regards to filling that, and perhaps it might be a good idea for council to maybe look at the composition of that board and whether or not the board should continue. We could definitely bring that back. So
when and how would we do that? And I know Council Balance waiting to have a chat.
My recommendation legislatively would to have Councillor Daneluik bring a notice of motion forward to review the committee.
Councillor Daneluik?
Actually, I think you read my mind, actually, because we were discussing, Mayor Stewart and I, a few days ago about the recent advertisement for the position. When the agenda came out, having nobody apply from the public to join the committee, it puts us in an awkward position. We had quorum this past meeting, not the previous meeting, so we're having quorum issues with lack of people on the committee. So no quorum, you can't get anything done. So I do think we need to review the committee's purpose as well as participation from the public in general, and way to fix that. So perhaps we can discuss this. I'm doing most motion in the January meeting, possibly. I'm not prepared to do it tonight, but we should give some thought to how best to proceed.
I'll touch base with you. As long as we're talking about committees, this is a good time to talk about the composition of the Subdivision Development Appeal Board. Because I know that there's been some best practices where councillors have moved off and more public members have moved on. And
thank you, Your Worship, through you to members of public. I actually have the SDAB organizational meeting happening on Thursday where I'll be discussing the composition of the board with the members. And at this time, I would like to discuss with the board members prior to bringing it in front of council.
Fair enough. Appreciate the answer on that one. So I see there's, in the request for decision, there's one motion to approve them all as presented. So I'm going to put it to members of council if that's a good way to go, or if we want to go committee by committee. No, all at once? Okay. Member of council prepared to move that we adopt the community, that council approve the 2020 council board and committee public appointments as presented. Councillor Barnhart.
I wasn't sure who had it first, but we all hit the button at the same time. Thank you, Your Worship. I would be pleased to make the motion to appoint the public members.
Discussion on the motion. Councillor Daneluik.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a very quick comment. Fortunately, I know almost every person nominated on these various committees, and I'm really happy with the quality of people who put their names forward. I wish we had more people of the same caliber looking for the CC committee, but that's under discussion, of course. But we do have qualified people looking at these committees, and I'm quite thrilled with the content and the quality of the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? And that carries unanimously. And just as we wrap this up, I'd like to say thank you to the Deputy Mayor for helping me sit and go through these applications. It's a bit of a process to get names on the list. So thank you very much. Which brings us to item 8C, Recreation Cost Share Agreement with Leduc County. Mr. Doplenko.
Good evening again to Your Worship and the rest of council. Curtis DeBlanco, Director of Finance, presenting the Recreation Cost Share Agreement on behalf of the Director of Community Services. Before you is a request for decision on this agreement. Background on this is the City of Beaumont and Leduc County have previously had an agreement. The agreement expired in 2012 and was not re-entered into at that time. However, cost sharing still existed, so the agreement in front of you is a renewal of this old agreement and sets forth the parameters for their cost sharing. Leduc County residents do have access to our recreation facilities and athletic fields. This agreement recognizes that their residents do use this and they would like to share the costs of these. My understanding is that to enter into a new agreement since the annexation has occurred that was delaying the old agreement. This agreement streamlines the shared funding mechanism to provide transparency and clarity going forward. The agreement is attached. Some highlights of it is that the formula is calculated on the net operating costs of the recreational facilities and parks. Once again, acknowledges the usage by county residents and is essentially calculated based on a percentage of residents in the county in the Beaumont area compared to the total population of the city. The agreement is for 3 years and provides funding certainty for both the City of Beaumont as well as operating cost certainty for the County of Leduc. And after the 3 years, a committee that will be in place would review the agreement on a 3-year basis. So with that being said, it is administration's recommendation that council approve the cost sharing agreement as presented. Other responses or alternatives would be not approving the cost share agreement or directing administration on how to proceed. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. This was a long time coming. Councillor Hendricks and I sat on a negotiating committee with the City, County of Leduc and hashed this all out over, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 meetings. And it worked out well. So is there a member of council willing to move that we approve the cost share agreement? Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, before we go there, perhaps the to speak to the highlights. There are some additional highlights in there with respect to new opportunities and new funding that they've provided. Maybe you could just touch on those.
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, some of the main changes from the old agreement would be including the entirety of the Ken Nickel Arena. It was Arena 1 first, as well as more funding for the operations of the BSRC, as well as changing the formula slightly in terms of the map of the county and the population increases. Right.
Which had a significant impact on the bottom line. Our dollars have improved significantly as a result. So I want to thank Leduc County for their acknowledgement in bringing forward really some issues that have been around for some time. I believe we've got a good deal that can now easily be ratified year over year. So in the next 3, we hope that this will be a fairly simple solution relative to the formula that's been built through this process. So thank you.
Councillor Daneluik.
Thank you, Worship. And Mr. Blanco, if I may, the Leduc County will contribute $265,000 in 2019, $265 in 2020, and $325 in 2021, as per the outline. Does that include the money going towards the operating expenses of the new rec facility? Is that included in those totals, or is it over and above?
Through your worship to Councillor Daneluik, I just want to make an adjustment. It was noted prior, but I forgot to mention here, the amount is in the agreement is $205 for 2019, $265 for 2020, and $325 for 2021. The answer to the question is yes. For 2020 and 2021, factored into the calculation would be the operating costs of the rec facility.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Through your worship, Mr. Blanco again. Just want to ask you a quick question about the formula used for calculation. There's one thing that struck me as slightly odd, and I'm going to go forward to, where am I here? Article 1.1c in the definitions. Basically says the county share, and it's the county population within the region divided by the city's population plus the county's population within the region again. Population figures to be considered will be the official population numbers most recently submitted to Alberta Municipal Affairs. So when we go down to the Schedule A, where there's the estimated count of 1586 in the Recreation District, that's a 2016 census estimated count. So my question is, shouldn't we be using, if we're getting the ratio of people in the residential count to the people in Beaumont, shouldn't we be using a figure from the same year in each case? But the definition seems to suggest that whoever's registered the latest number with the province they would use the higher number, assuming we're growing. What I'm trying to say is that if we're using an estimated 2016 total for the county, should we not also be using a 2016 value for Beaumont? Or conversely, if the county can provide us with a 2019 number, then we would then use the 2019 one for Beaumont, which is 2,000 higher. And does the wording need to be adjusted in some way to take account of that?
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, I see what you're saying with that. As far as just using the most updated numbers and them being the most reliable, I believe is what the spirit of the agreement was going for in terms of how often the county does their census and updates their population numbers. I mean, that would be something out of our control. In terms of, that's would be my comment on that.
Okay, so I imagine the county does not do a census as frequently as we do, does it? Do we know?
No. They do it every 2 years, if they do it at all.
Okay, I'm just wondering, all I'm thinking is that perhaps the wording needs to be amended in the formula to say that the population numbers used are the latest available for both parties.
Okay. I
And
get where
same year for both parties.
I get where you're going, but honestly, it's a minor population adjustment. And this would require, if we're going to go for this, it's going to require reopening the agreement and starting negotiations with the county to redo this formula.
Which we don't want to do.
So I don't particularly want to do it. If council decides that they would like Councillor Hendricks and I to go back and sit with the county, let's have at it. But I think it's minor, and Councillor Hendricks can weigh in.
Right. Thank you. So part of this process has been timing. It takes some time to get all of this process through from start to finish, including meetings with the two finance departments to discuss rules of accounting and process. And so we finally got to a baseline where, okay, well, that's settled. Here's the process in terms of what we're prepared to put into the deal, which includes Ken Nickel number 2 sheet of ice, which was not in since the inception of the building. So that's a huge thank you. And then, back to Leduc County for doing that, and the entire rec center, along with some other accounting discussions as to how we were going to adjust and treat accounting on both ends. And ultimately, you just got to put a line in the sand somewhere and say, okay, well, that's it. That's how this is going to go down. And then here are the numbers, and let's get this done. Because if now we decided to put this off to spring planning, you're back at it, right? You're going to be back into lines in the sand. And what they wanted was cost certainty. They want to just lay it out for 3 years. We were pushing for 4. 3 years, this is the number, this is the number, this is the number, and then they know what to budget for, and they're done, because they've got competing interests with other communities also that yes. They also facilitate their facilities and stuff.
And so realistically, that particular formula, and you can correct me if I'm going wrong here, it really only kicks in with the capital, which isn't defined. Like the capital contributions that they're going to make over and
above. Your worship,
operating.
the funding includes operating as well.
Yeah, but it's pretty much set for the next 3 years.
Yes, that's the funding formula is utilized to get a flat fee, so to speak. It's utilized from our 5-year financial plan. So it's an estimate. It's trying to get precise with an estimate is how precise we want to get.
No, just to be clear, I'm not in favour of delaying it or renegotiating it at all. I understand the amount of negotiation that's already occurred to get this result, which is clearly in our interests as well as the county's. So yeah, no. All I'd like to say is I think we should use the same year when we're doing this. We should measure at the same point and compare apples with apples and not with oranges. But that said, if it's not explicit in the agreement, I think we can assume it as a gentleman's agreement. Am I allowed to say that nowadays? Gentle person's agreement. That's a reasonable interpretation of that formula anyway, even if it's not explicit. So yes, thank you.
Councillor Daneluik.
Your Worship, I would move that the recommendation that Council approve the recommendation cost share agreement as presented. I would be prepared to move that motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We just need a motion. So any further discussion on the item at hand? All right, seeing none. All in favor? And that carries unanimously. Which brings us to item 8D, notice of motion, proposed change to committee of the whole meeting format. Ms. Winters, followed by Councillor Hendricks, whose motion it is.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council and the public. In accordance with the meeting procedures bylaw 953-19, once a notice of motion is made, it will be placed on the next regular meeting agenda, in which the elected official who made the notice of motion is present. At the November 26, 2019 council meeting, Councillor Hendricks made the following notice of motion: that the committee of the whole meeting format be replaced with the regular council meeting format, including meeting start times. Administration is looking for direction on how council wishes to proceed this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendricks.
Worship, thank you. And I've prepared a text so I stay on script and not wander too much. So thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to allow me to expand my thoughts regarding my notice of motion. Council, in my opinion, is most effective when the powers of the Municipal Government Act are utilized during regular council meetings. The rules of engagement are clear, The rules of process are clear. We provide members of the public full access for engagement with our council and administration. Which brings me to our committee of the whole meetings. These meetings have been subject to constant requirements of clarity relative to rules of engagement, rules of process, and will not allow members of the public full access for engagement with our council and administration. The agenda items of a committee of the whole meeting are materially the same as a regular council meeting without the teeth of process and public input that a regular council meeting brings. So I'd like to suggest that to my fellow council members that we serve our community in a more decisive, proactive, and time-sensitive manner by replacing the committee of the whole meetings with that of a regular council meeting format. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, and I appreciate having a chance to reflect on this, because I think it's important council does that from time to time. But if I could ask directly a question to perhaps to Councillor Hendricks, just to clarify
Sure.
his thoughts on this one. Is it your intention, Councillor, to have weekly council meetings?
The format can either be that we take the COTW process and put the rules of a regular council meeting into a COTW, or just have a regular council meeting, as you say, every Tuesday, 3 times a week, or sorry, 3 times a month.
Just to speak to that, my thoughts on that is that maybe we've gone away from what the committee intent was, but I understood the committee intent to be we would have more in-depth discussion about some items before we had to vote on them. That was my hope, to have committee meetings. If they're all council meetings, we take away that opportunity, sounds like.
Okay.
I agree with you. I don't think we've had clarity around the process, because we're voting at both, and yet we know we can't make decisions as a council at a committee, so what are we voting on? So it is confusing. So I do agree it needs clarification, but I don't think we need weekly council meetings.
Great. So, and if I can, Councillor Barnhart, and I've seen the frustration within this chamber. I've seen the passion that's shown up as a result of the frustration. I've seen people that are moved by the fact that we can't create decisions, we can't create direction in these discussions. We're simply there to listen. We can't tell administration by way of motion, because we're not allowed motions. We're supposed to be doing a consensus-based approach, but it doesn't really exist. We have the hand thing that goes up every now and again to see if we got consensus. So I'm at the end of many of these, I'm just spinning with this conversation, going, what did we just do here today, and what did we put our time into, and what did we accomplish, other than the fact that the same items are going to now come back to us in a council meeting. So we're doing it twice. If we had the ability to at least make a decision, put a vote to it, and create direction, at least that part of it would give me solace that we've accomplished something at the meetings. But if it's just sort of telling the admin, well, this is kind of where we're going, but we can't give you direction, I don't see that. And I've seen how it's really torn at this council at times. There's been some interesting topics that have come in front of us that some people have shown a lot of passion, yet could not deal with it at that meeting because we're limited to the rules of process. And then we're told what the policies are, and then we're reminded what we're not allowed to do in those meetings by admin. Okay, well, then we're basically there to sit and listen.
So essentially, the pain point you're trying to fix is the ability to give direction to admin. Correct?
Right. So if I can, Your Worship, if there's a matter before us and you're asking elected officials just to listen, can't give direction, you can't vote on it, the pedigree in politics doesn't allow for that. What is it that you want accomplished in a meeting like that, where the public's not even allowed to speak, the public is allowed to come to the meetings and listen, but they're not allowed to have any input. There's no public portion of the meeting, which I find interesting and troubling, because we've had this room full. People want to speak, and in lieu of speaking, they clap. to get their point across. We need something that allows a full room access to a mic to be able to speak to us. We can't be set up in a room where our backs are to them. That's awkward. I know we've tried to change the table around. We've dealt with the mics. We've dealt with our back turned to our admin because our backs are now to the admin, and the admin starts talking, and you got to look to see who's now speaking. It's just so awkward. The whole process, to me, doesn't flow.
Because all right, so I hear what you're saying. I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you. All right, because that committee meeting is designed to have council to be able to sit in a less formal atmosphere, be able to listen to admin present its arguments or present its presentation, and for council to have really good discussions surrounding the subject matter at hand. And so I agree with you. There has to be a way to be able to direct admin, and we've had some discussions surrounding that. And I believe that there's actually a mechanism within our procedural bylaw. We just have to have a quick reinterpretation and have a quick discussion as members of council as to how to do that. Because I did reach out to some of our regional colleagues, and they're actually getting rid of council meetings in favor of committee of the whole, because that's where they're feeling the better discussions they're having. And so they're even doing things so far as to give their direct counsel some admin, and then it comes to the next council meeting for confirmation of decision to allow the decision that was made at a committee of the whole meeting. So council has a week or two or whatever it is between committee of the whole meeting and council meeting to be able to have that second thought and to do that. If we wanted to be nimble and quick, we'd throw it on the consent agenda. And if a council member wanted to pull it off, we could pull it off. But there's lots of things that we can do to fix the process without killing the meeting as a whole.
Right. So that's why I used the word format. Okay. That's why I used that of a regular council meeting format. I think we need to put some process in there to allow people to make a motion, vote, and give direction. You can't bring some of the topics that we've had in front of us and leave us with nothing.
Because the way your motion reads is you want to kill the format completely and just replace it with a council meeting, which could take away that ability to have sober second thought or see us start to defer everything.
Right. So what I'm offering is that I'm trying to find a way to get teeth into this process, that we have the ability to allow a decision within that room so that we vote, we agree, and we're heading in a direction, even if that means bringing it to the next council meeting. That when I've heard you often, Your Worship, saying, "Have I got consensus?" Mm-hmm. What is that? And we've often said, "Well, what does that mean? Does four out of 7 is consensus?" Don't know what that means, right? So I'd rather just get the math up, hit the button. This is what we're doing, and we move on. Or do I wait till this whole matter comes back to council and rehash what we just discussed? Right? That's the conundrum.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Councillor Daneluik, thoughts?
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Hendricks, of course, it's your motion, so I'll speak to you directly. I have some thoughts on this issue. I've given a lot of thought to it, and I guess my question might be, you have a lot of history on council, as we all know, and I respect that completely. My understanding is that we are under the same format, committee of the whole meetings, as we had done before our term started 2 years ago, essentially. So help me get my head around how you feel or what you've observed that COW meetings are different than they were previously. I'm not saying what was done before was right or wrong. I'm just saying what has changed so dramatically that you feel this way regarding how our COW meetings are being run. Now, for example, I have found myself a bit confused in COWs how we should proceed. Again, rookie councillor, first term, I get that. Maybe we could have done a little better job 2 years ago saying exactly how COWs are supposed to work. Maybe we dropped the ball if they're together, but we're now 2 years into our mandate. I'm not too sure how our COWs have changed what they were doing previously. Help me understand how they've changed, because I really value the discussions we have in COW. We can really roll up our sleeves and have some good, healthy debate, and we've had some healthy debate on issues. We can't do that in council meetings, so I don't want to lose that. So help me understand where you're coming from and how they may have changed over your previous council experience? Maybe help me understand that.
Right. So the letters have changed over time. It used to be a GMC, General Management Committee meeting. It was a very free-flowing conversation. It allowed agenda items to be added as we discussed things through the evening. It was never parlayed to the point where this is all you can talk about, and this is the range to which you can talk about those issues. And no, you can't have a conversation with your admin about where you want to go with this discussion. We never had any of that. It was just, like you say, a free-flowing conversation about all matters, and I mean all matters. All matters have disappeared. It's gotten tightened down to just a very specific agenda package. It doesn't allow for councillors to provide ad hoc sort of add-ons, which we used to have in the past because things were coming and going, and you'd add, say, a topic that just came up days earlier, and you wanted to get some clarification. And all of that has disappeared. We're literally down to an agenda item. We're literally down to being advised that by rule, this is all you can do, and this is all you can say, and you cannot add on to the agenda. You cannot expand beyond what we've given, and you can't vote, and you can't direct. Well, that's a long ways from where we were, which was just having an open, frank conversation about matters. And so it's become it's become one step away from a council meeting by way of process, without the ability for us to give direction. And I certainly witnessed it at the last COTW, where the frustration level was through the roof, and I felt bad for some of those who were really taking it personally. And I said, okay, this has got to stop. We have to figure out a way for us to be able to talk without being taken back to an agenda and being taken back through process and being taken back through reminders of how we have to operate under this COTW. It's so constraining that it doesn't allow for that free discussion that we used to have.
May I follow up?
Sure.
I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to get my head around it still. I want to be as open-minded this potential as possible, without losing what we already have. But my understanding is the agenda has to be published ahead of time to give the public a chance to come and attend. They can't speak at CWs. They're not supposed to applaud either, but they did, obviously, which is a bit of an awkward thing for us, obviously. But the public can't speak at CW meetings, and they haven't been able to, and they can't under our term either, of course. But my understanding is that the agenda items are published so people can come and be aware of what we're going to talk about, to be able to listen to it, and at least be there in person. So we really couldn't walk on agenda items morning of because something came up. I understand that, but I'm not a big rules guy. If they make sense, I'm okay with the rules. If rules don't make sense, I'm against them. But my understanding is that the rules are there. We can't walk agenda items on because the public has to have enough notice about what we're going to be talking about. So I don't know how to address your concern with that. If the rules are wrong, my interpretation is wrong, please correct me. But my understanding is that we can't, despite something that came up that morning, for example, we can't walk an agenda item onto COW unless it's been published to the public ahead of time. Is that correct?
No.
So are you suggesting in the previous administration you were part of that you guys as a council member walk on agenda items to COW at any time you wanted to? Is that what was happening previously? Or I'm misinterpreting what you're suggesting. I'm trying to be open here on this. So please clarify for me.
So tonight we have a regular council meeting. Mm-hmm. We have the adoption agenda. We have an ask as to whether or not there's any additions to the agenda. We're being told that if we want to get anything added to the COTW meetings, we've got to do it through this meeting, right, to get it onto that agenda. That's the process. But we could add things to tonight's meeting that isn't in the agenda package, right? We could. We have had items brought by admin to the COTW meetings as walk-ons because they had to be dealt with, and perhaps they go in camera because they had to be dealt with. So that process does exist. We should be able to, if there's an issue that has found its way to us, hours or days or weeks or months or whatever it was, and now it's, we don't have a process. How do we get stuff on the COTW as councillors, as this council? Right? We don't have that. Like, there is no mechanism for us other than making a notice of motion or creating some agenda adjustment at this meeting to make it go to the COTW meeting. And otherwise, there is no other way. We can send an email, I guess, to our mayor and say, listen, this is a suggestion, but does the mayor then meet with admin and make a decision on the COTW agenda? And how do we get our item on? I don't know. So I'm just saying it's becoming so, as they say, lawyered up in terms of process, that how do you just have a free-flowing discussion when you want to ask simple things like I brought on the recognition issue with respect to the previous council. Okay, why can't that just be a discussion? Why do I have to advise the public and go to the land development, make sure it's publicized there on our website and everything else to ensure that this conversation that's going to walk in is well publicized? That's not what we used to have under the GMCs, for sure.
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to check, but I think there's some MGA requirements in this as well that we may not be. It may not be possible for us to do what you want to do, but I would have to go back and check to be sure.
Right. So we as a group are left with the topic of the day, which is presented to us. And I certainly can feel the frustration at times that there's other things to talk about. How do we get it on to an agenda item so that we can have the discussion?
So I think that's a great pain point to fix. I still don't think getting rid of committee of the whole is the way to fix it, but I think it's definitely worth exploring.
Sure.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been listening and trying to discern for myself what the problem was we're trying to solve, and I think I've heard a lot of that, so thanks for the discussion. Obviously, firsthand, the issue that I've seen is that we can't give administration direction, and we're looking for consensus to the point where we have Councillor asking a definition of consensus, and myself as the chair scrambling on the fly to try and look that up, and it was awkward. And it wasn't awkward as a personal question, it was just an awkward point of process, wondering what actually is consensus. Is it 4 of 7? Is it 5 of 7? Is it 6 of 7? Is it hands? Is it nods? And then we had the issue where the inability process-wise for councillor to walk on the agenda item, despite admin's ability to walk on an item. The concern for no public input portion on the meeting, that one I think I'm probably okay with because we do have a pretty solid process for this. But the part that I'm kind of stuck on is the how do we get agenda items brought forward, like kind of the last plea you made there. And one of the things I had wondered is if there was a way to add a councillor inquiries portion to the committee of the whole meeting, but then perhaps we'd have the councillor inquiries section in this meeting replicated over there. We already have a way to do that here, but that only brings the councillor inquiries to the I guess more formal process, should you say, and not to the less formal process where this discussion seemed to happen more freely. So again, I don't have a solution here. I'm just saying that getting to the heart of the problem that we're trying to solve is coming down to kind of about 3 points for me. And personally, I'd like to see some direction or options from administration on how we might solve some of these pain points before I go ahead and say, yes, I'd like to change the format. And I think the spirit of the motion is to have this discussion tonight. And I definitely welcome the discussion. I'm just kind of confused as what our next step could be. Well, I know we could just say yes and move on, but what are our other options? So administration or your worship for some direction.
What I'm sort of hearing here is we want to have a robust discussion around some options, and we're going to need to bring our administration to the table. So I think the next step in this process is actually to make a motion to put the committee of the whole process on as an agenda item at the next committee of the whole.
Your worship, I'd be happy with that.
So if you're prepared to make that motion.
Yes. Yes, and I'm hoping that we'll get a full vetting of process that allows us options to talk about it and try to figure this out. This, I think, needs to be fixed, personally.
Mr. Schweitzer?
Just to add some facts, and I don't disagree that we've had some confusion as we evolve through the committee. Going back to the bylaw or to the procedurals bylaw, it does allow you, and as in fact, is designed to provide direction to to administration. And it specifically talks about 4 distinct purposes of the committee of the whole and where you can make motions. And one is to receive information. The other is to refer matters back to administration or to a committee. From administration's perspective, the value in that meeting is it allows us to bring a big item like a master plan where there's a number of forks in the road that we need to travel down and we need some direction. What I think we need to do in the committee is make that by formal motion. And you're right, we have been confusing the word consensus with motion. The word consensus doesn't exist in our bylaw, nor does it exist in the MGA. I think one thing we can do right off the bat is make that very clear that we are directing by motion. So if council decides that they want to go down this fork, let's do a vote and we can formalize that motion. When we look at making decisions, part of our job is to make sure we provide council with adequate information. Part of council's job is that they debate that information at length if that's what it takes. The third and a big change, or a significant change in the MGA with the revisions is the word transparency. So a lot of those restricting rules that Councillor Hendricks is talking about is to allow, and Councillor Daneluik talked about it, allow the public to see what you're dealing with and how you're dealing with it. So those are some options. There are restrictions in a committee of the whole, and there are 3 things you cannot do, and that is you can't pass a bylaw, you can't adopt a budget, and you can't deal with issues of taxes. Those must be dealt in a regular meeting. There's a personnel caveat in there as well, but that's it. The rest is up to you. We can do that. We can provide that direction. We do it by motion, formal motion. And again, I didn't want to weigh into your debate. I'm just throwing out some stuff that's right out of the committee of the whole, the procedural bylaw. But what triggered me is when you talked about bringing it back to the next committee. If you had a look at that agenda, it's a long one.
Would we be okay with January's committee of the whole meeting or a special committee of the whole meeting?
Your Worship, what I'd like to see is a document that provides some options.
Okay.
Something that comes back to us with a understanding the temperature, understanding the direction, understanding what discussions taking place here this evening, that we can format that into a process. And
okay.
And from my way of thinking, that's a document that we get for review prior to the COTW meeting. And if it's that simple and it's that clean and clear, then why couldn't we just adopt it? And I don't know what the adoption process is.
Okay, so we'll take this in a couple of steps. Then we'll put together a document, ship it out,
please. And
I still want to have. At some point, I would want to have a discussion with council to make sure everybody's clear. And right. We're all interpreting the document the same way.
Right.
Then we can go from there. So if we can get it between now and next week, we will. But
sure.
It might be early January.
Okay. No, best efforts. I appreciate that.
Councillor Daneluik?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some thoughts and reflection here. So the motion in front of us right now, if I had to vote on this motion as it sits right now, I would have to say no.
The motion in front of us, Councillor Hendricks has moved that we bring a discussion surrounding process and to the next committee of the whole meeting, but we've now modified that motion to do a document and then bring it first available best efforts.
Okay. I don't want to get into tucking procedure here, of course, but I don't want to get stuck.
So this motion's dead.
So this is dead.
That's not a motion we're talking about today.
Okay. I guess as a follow-up to the document, if council is of the idea, hindsight's never wrong for one thing. Maybe we should sit down and have a 1-hour session with administration on the existing committee of the whole structure. Because that's what we can and can't do. Identify the gaps, identify the issues, and say, based on that, maybe we restructure our CWL meetings, because you've raised some good points. I've had some confusion myself from time to time, but maybe looking back on it, maybe we could do a refresher right now based on our current rules and see how we can tweak them once we know exactly what we're supposed to do. Because I myself have been confused a couple of times, and I thought I knew the rules, and sometimes you think, is that right or wrong? Maybe we need to do a quick refresher under the existing format. Bring your concern into it after we do that. I'm willing to take an hour and do it.
That's the motion ahead. That's the force and effect of the motion in front of us.
Well, my understanding the motion was to bring back a document.
Well, to start discussion.
If you're okay with that, I think there's some good points here. We need to move this along, but not. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you then.
The document is for review. It's the speed discussion. is my understanding. Correct?
I just want to confirm, because there's a lot of discussion going on with regards to a motion. Currently, that administration draft a document outlining options for a new committee of the whole format.
No, it's not a new committee to explain explain our current options for decision-making authorities within our current format. That will bring us a discussion point to see if we need to make any changes. I don't know how you want to word that, but we're going to review the existing so we can make the tweaks necessary to solve the pain points.
Okay.
CEO?
Yeah, that was my understanding, and what we'll do is get that document out sooner than later. So that way we can send it out by email. Then we'll bring it back to the proper format so the public can see it and the whole bit is a debate. But we'll do an explanation of the current decision-making and pinch points of the committee of the whole for distribution prior to that. So I'm not saying you have to wait till January. We just think you have no room.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to add a comment that the process tonight, I think, has illustrated Councillor Hendricks, the problem that Councillor Hendricks is trying to address, which is that the whole process to get here has been he has had to make a notice of motion at one council meeting to bring forward a motion at another council meeting to have a discussion about the rules for the committee of the whole meeting, which then get put into a document to go to another committee of the whole meeting or whatever is suitably scheduled. It's not a nimble process. I share his frustration as to how do I get something onto the agenda.
And I hear what you're saying, but some of this is MGA opposed.
And indeed, but are there not ways that we can comply with the MGA but provide a more nimble process that's more transparent and
we're about to find out.
Yes. That's all I have to say.
No worries. All right, seeing no further discussion on the motion, all in favor? Councillor Daneluik? You didn't register. You might have, but I'm having trouble with the buttons tonight too. So that carries unanimously. Which brings us to item 9A, and Councillor Hendricks. We're wanting to step out. Thank you very much. So what brings us to item 9A, Bylaw 966-19, our Centre-Ville area redevelopment plan, first reading. Mr.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worships and members of Council. I'm here excited to bring Bylaw 966-19, our Centre-Ville area redevelopment plan for your consideration of first reading. Our Centre-Ville is a result of a collaborative discussions and workshops, as well as public engagement activities with a variety of stakeholders that include the landowners, business owners, school boards, community groups, residents of Centre-Ville and Beaumont-Vile, and the administration. The plan was presented to the Committee of the Whole on November the 19th for a fulsome discussion. Administration received positive feedback from the committee and made several final edits to the document, such as the clarification of the precinct land uses and overall pedestrian and bike routes and connection systems. Our Centre-Ville designed to provide a new vision for the development and revitalization of Centre-Ville Beaumont's downtown over the next 25 plus years. It also proposes urban design strategies, land use concepts, and policies for the 4th precinct in Centre-Ville. Our Centre-Ville allows for a diversity of development opportunities such as civic, institutional, residential, commercial, and cultural amenities and uses throughout the entire area. However, each of the 4 precincts will also offer a distinct character and a focused theme regarding land use and build forms. The civic and institutional precinct not only is the civic center of Beaumont, but also a destination of choice for civic and recreational events and festivals in Beaumont and the surrounding region. The downtown core precinct is the commercial and employment center of Beaumont and will provide opportunities for mixed-use developments and more intense residential developments in Beaumont. The residential infill precinct allows for low and medium density residential development opportunities with or without commercial components. The cultural heritage precinct recognizes the significant history of St. Vital Church that plays the role in the city of Beaumont. As such, this precinct portrays and reflects this heritage and cultural life in Beaumont. In addition, this precinct acknowledges the potential of new amenities and venues to create a cultural destination. It is important to mention that achieving the visions, the goals and objectives of the plan will require supporting infrastructures such as water, storm and wastewater networks, mobility and transportation networks, parking and access, and much more. The plan also lays out implementation and monitoring strategies to support continuous improvements to the plan. The plans comply and is consistent with policies of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Growth Plan. In particular, our Centre-Ville provides a roadmap to achieve the aspirational density target of 100 dwelling units per net residential hectares and a 10% intensification target within Beaumont's built-up area as set by the growth plan. The plan also aligns with Beaumont's Municipal Development Plan, our complete community, which set out policy direction for transforming Beaumont's downtown as the major business, social, cultural, and entertainment focus of the community with a distinct French flair in support of a prosperous, vibrant, healthy, and welcoming community. Based on the above analysis, administration recommends the approval of the first reading of Bylaw 966-19. Following the first reading, the Area Redevelopment Plan will be circulated to the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board for their review and approval through the Regional Evaluation Framework process. Once it is approved by the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board under the REF process, it will be brought back to Council for public hearing and second and third readings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So open it up to members of Council for questions. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to have to ask for your indulgence for a few minutes while I ask what will probably seem like a philosophical question, but I do have a point that I want to get to, and I'll get to it as quickly as I can. So, on that basis, through your worship to Mr. Wong, you've presented the strategic plan, and I'm sorry, I beg your pardon, not the strategic plan. You've presented the redevelopment plan. That's better. We've read the redevelopment plan this evening tonight, and reading through it, a key feature of it is the subdivision of Centre-Ville into the 4 precincts that you've described, and that's a big part of what we're doing here. I think you'll agree, or what the plan proposes. Those 4 precincts. The question that I wanted to ask, this is where it gets philosophical. Those 4 precincts describe different parts of Centre-Ville. Is it the intent of the plan that those precincts are descriptive or prescriptive? And by descriptive, I mean, here's a description of the things that are there, but future changes and amendments and additions may or may not conform with those uses. Or if it's prescriptive, is it this is what's going into this place? Future changes or amendments will have to conform with this, and perhaps permission might not be approved or might be conditional on meeting criteria.
This is more descriptive than prescriptive. I would answer that question that way, because the plan provides policy directions for actual developments that are taking place on the ground. For example, the policy that are described in the plan provides policy direction for the land use bylaw. For example, this building setback. what
Yes.
kind of landscaping. That will not be from the plan itself. It will be from the land use bylaw, because the ARP will not provide that regulatory prescription for the development, because that is when a developer comes to the city to apply for the development permit, they have to comply with the land use bylaw, and the plan will provide directions to the developer. For example, in the residential precinct, it is the emphasis of redevelopments to promote low and infill redevelopment of residential housing. So that is the gist of the policy. So in the land use bylaw, there are several land use districts that will provide the direction. For example, the integrated neighborhood district that will provide all the development regulations if you want to build a single-family home or a low-rise apartment townhouse or whatever. But the plan itself will say this is a residential infill precinct, and that will give the direction to the land use bylaw and, for example, the urban design guidelines to provide how the developer will develop the site planning and the building. So this plan is more like a description, provide direction for future development of regulatory framework for the developers to take place.
Thank you. Good.
I hope I answered that question.
You did. Thank you very much. And
Keep going, yeah.
Develop this just a little further. Okay. So good. That was my reading of it too, and I went through and looked at the language that it uses in terms of shalls and mays and musts and wills. And yes, my reading of it was that it was a statement of what was already there, and that most of the other requirements were mays, where this is allowed, but it's not required. So I read it as and I'm glad to hear that the intent is that it is descriptive. So what then happens is that this is a 25-year plan, and it's my experience and of government and of rules and regulations and the application of them and the bureaucracy that necessarily goes with government, that over time descriptive can become prescriptive, because in the space of the 25 years that this conceivably covers, I'm sure there's not going to be many faces sitting in the same seats as there are today. So people forget, and we fall into, I think we naturally fall into a pattern of this is the way it is, and therefore it is the way it ought to be. I don't know if you would agree with me. There is a danger of it becoming, and I'm also going to make this contention to council. I don't know whether there's any consensus, if I can use that word, that descriptive things can become prescriptive because we've always done it this way. This is the way it ought to be.
If I may answer it this way, because this is a plan. It has a vision of 25 plus years and set out the direction for the revitalization and the redevelopment of Beaumont's downtown. But there is also these elements in the plans that is providing implementations and also monitoring strategies that we have to come back and reveal what is on the ground, because a lot of the policy direction that I've described in the plan now, even today, it is very positive. It is very logical. It looks good, but probably in a couple of years' time, for example, a lot of these factors may change. Economy, environmental requirements, those will change. So at the time, if there are any triggers that we require us to review the plan, so then we will have to look at the plan again, and hopefully that process will not basically make the plan to be prescriptive, and this is what we ought to be as you described. So, and hopefully that process will be able to allow the administration and also council have the opportunity to take a look and see whether those policies are still relevant. And also that triggers the need to maybe review and make some adjustment to the land use bylaw, for example. Then it won't be make it into prescriptive plan. So.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, just one last thing. And again, I don't know if there's any appetite for this. I am wondering if part of my issue looking at this is the fact that the precincts are actually given separate names that have a descriptive value to them. And I'm wondering if we might be able to avoid some of the hazards of this becoming prescriptive if we used non-descriptive language. So what I'm suggesting is that maybe we should just call them first, second, third, fourth precincts, rather than this is the civic and institutional precinct, which tends to suggest that, well, only civic and institutional things should go in here.
And that is probably part of the discussions in the last committee meeting. Actually, a lot of the land users they are allowed in each precinct. For example, there will be allowing some commercial elements, even though commercial elements, for example, even within the civic and institutional precinct.
Yes.
But the emphasis of that precinct is to create that environment. That is the recreation and cultural civic center of Beaumont. And also, for example, in the downtown core precinct, which is the employment center, commercial center of Beaumont, downtown Beaumont. And also, and other elements that we put in there in the downtown core is the intensification of residential development. That is why we ensure that it will be a mixed-use destination. So with a mixture of commercial and residential in the area, but the highlight is still the commercial. It is the Beaumont's downtown, and the residential infill. We expanded the boundary as we discussed last time, because somehow downtown Beaumont is identified as a built-up area in the Edmonton Metropolitan Growth Plan, and we need to basically achieve the aspirational target of 100 dwelling units per residential hectare. So that is why we need to expand the areas, and hopefully with the policies that encourage redevelopment, residential redevelopment, we will be able to achieve that residential number. So and each area there will be it will be allowed different elements of different land uses, but the emphasis, the neighborhood character would be like the downtown core, the residential portion, the civic and the institutional, and the Cinque Terre heritage precinct. So it is the character area within the whole Centre-Ville. The whole Centre-Ville, there is a vision for that, because, like, for example, the Centre-Ville will be the cultural center of the region, not just Beaumont. People from the surrounding areas will come to Beaumont for the cultural activities, for example. So.
Okay, and so the objectives don't change with respect to the names. The objectives of each of the precincts remains unchanged unless a subsequent plan or a subsequent council or mayor decides that they want to change those things, which is, I'm still thinking that the name should be non-descriptive, but
I'm going to disagree. I think the names being descriptive tell people exactly what we want to have happen in our Centre-Ville area.
Very well. My only concern is that this doesn't become prescriptive, that this becomes the only thing in the course of time, the only thing that you can do in this district, and that, I beg your pardon, this precinct, and that other uses are forbidden or strongly discouraged, let's say.
The intention right now is not, but all we can do is do the best we can, and with our current administration and current council and the interpretations as they are, trust that we've done our work well enough that it remains that way over the life of the plan, and that other councils and other administrations that come after us see the wisdom of it. That's all we can do.
Yes.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. through to admin. A couple of questions. First one has been asked before a couple of different ways, but I don't know that I'm as clear as I could be on it. So when we look at the residential infill precinct, and specifically the piece that was bolted on east of 50th Street there to expand that, we've had robust discussion around that, and I understand how that came to be, and there's been strong engagement on that, so that's not where I'll go. But if you could walk me through being an existing resident in that area who wants to do improvements to their property, what becomes a vision as part of a redevelopment plan and a nice to have from the city's perspective versus the need to have portion that the residential landowner occupant needs to follow. It kind of comes back to the descriptive versus prescriptive. I think that was a good way to theme that. But if I owned a property there and I was going to do improvements, what special things would I have to do to comply with once a redevelopment plan like this would be adopted? Would you be able to speak to that a bit?
As previously discussed, the plan doesn't restrict you what you can or cannot do. The residential infill precinct encourages redevelopment of existing residential buildings. For example, if there is a single-family home that are 30 or 40, it's not that old now in the neighborhood, it is, but if in a couple of years, or maybe even now, there are some landowners want to redevelop their single-family homes and try to redevelop it as a duplex, for example. There is nothing that, or even if they want to tear it down and build a bigger single-family home, there is nothing the plan will stop it from happening. The regulatory framework, as I mentioned, is from the land use bylaw. And the land use bylaw allows single-family homes all the way up to a four-story walk-up if the site is big enough, because there is the site requirements there. So it doesn't, the plan doesn't restrict what you can or cannot do. The plan only allows or provides direction to the land use bylaw. If the land use bylaw doesn't provide the opportunities, then we have to amend the land use bylaw to provide the opportunities for future landowners, homeowners who want to redevelop the site as per the description of the plan. So there is nothing the plan would restrict or maybe prescribe what an owner can or cannot do.
And I think your last statement is kind of where I was going with this, is that it actually isn't prescriptive, although it does contain a plan and a vision. It's not prescriptive, so that's good. Thank you for that. I think that piece of clarity is important. There's a section in here that speaks to, updating that would be required to the water and wastewater system. There's a couple of maps in there, but then we get into an implementation section. I would direct to page 116 of 126, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up.
Yep.
It's 74 in the plan itself, and page 116 of 126.
Yep.
So that's fine right there. Thank you. So in the timeline section, just wondering, when you look at short-term versus medium-term versus long-term, so, if we just take the first item, check valves in the short-term, responsibility to Beaumont, and we go down and it says, committed to projects planning approvals likely to be completed within the next 5 to 7 years. So is it fair to say, should this plan be adopted in 2020, looking forward to when second and third reading would go in, that 5 to 7 years from, so 2025 to 2027 is when Beaumont would be looking to take responsibility for the items that are actioned here. Is that a fair representation of the funds we're going to have to put into this?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, because those are the projects that when we prepare for the plan, those are the projects that would basically satisfy the proposed redevelopments for the area. Because, for example, you are introducing density into the areas, so a lot of the infrastructures may have to be upgraded. But there are also the trigger points that really requires something. So initially, the administration will be evaluating on a case-by-case basis when a development permit, depending on the economy too, how many application comes in. So initially it will depend on a case-by-case basis, and some of the development application will require some off-site improvements. So that is that the onus will be on the developers for that particular development to do some upgrades off-site even. So, but to a certain degree, the city and that is where the importance of monitoring the strategy comes into play. The administration, through those processes, will monitor. Okay, this is the time that we may start looking into those situations, and we will make the recommendations through the budget process with council and say, hey, this is where we will start looking at it. And the one thing that I would like to say to council is, even though those are the projects that is required, and as mentioned in the council report, section 637 of the MGA says that whatever project that is listed in the plan doesn't bind the councils to undertake those projects. So city councils still the decision makers of what, when, and how those projects will be undertaken. So with the administration recommendations, for example, through the capital budgeting exercise, then we will introduce that these are the projects that is actually required for the future, for the near future. So the timelines that is set and at the footnote of the table are those suggestions. You know, if everything goes well, and it also depends on the economy, how fast developments are coming in. So it may not take that long. It may be in the next 2-3 years. I don't know, or it may take longer. So forward.
Follow? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a pretty succinct explanation there. And all things being equal, I hope we have to put money towards it sooner. That'd be great.
Yep.
With anything, I was trying to go through this document and figure out what the cost of this document was to Beaumont, besides people time to put this thing together. And near as I could figure, this is where the cost is going to come into Beaumont, is this table. You know, I throw an idea out there. I know it's first reading. We're just looking for clarifying questions, and like a clarifying moment or thought I had in my head is that with anything, you know, we've seen Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. There's an aspect of this to looking to what development permits are being submitted, and therefore will trigger what development requirement or what size line or whatever else. So, you know, there may be opportunities from an economic development standpoint to identify some of these things to bring them forward to reduce the timelines or requirements or such to promote development and growth in our Centre-Ville. So it was something that I twigged on when I went through this, and I was thinking, what is the cost of this to Beaumont? So that's all I have for thoughts, and thank you for the questions. Like, very great answers tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, and Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Wong. I don't have any further questions. I think you've done an admirable job of answering councillors' questions this evening. I just want to say that I think the engagement process and the outcome here are really what I was expecting and hoping for, and look forward to second and third reading and what the Capital Region Board does say. And I think it's key. You've hit on the points about the economic driver. If we show the vision, I think we have a better opportunity to attract people to come and build in our community. And we were often told, well, you don't have anything ready, you know, like your land's not ready, I don't have these policies in place. Now we do. Well, we will soon. So I really appreciate the work you've done on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just carrying on with Councillor Barnhart's comments about the public engagement that was done. Excellent work, by the way. Really happy to see that. Now that the plan's complete, what's sort of the rollout to present it to the public beyond a public hearing?
After we send it to the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board for the draft process, we are actually contemplating a public open house again on January 22nd and 23rd, 2 days, to present the plan to the public again, just to inform them this has gone through first reading, and these are the plan, and see if there are any final thoughts that we miss or whatever that is missing from the plan, or anything that we can still improve, even though while hopefully there was not major amendments to the plan. Otherwise, we have to resubmit to the Metropolitan Board. But there are some minor tweaking that we can do before coming back to the public hearing. So,
cool. Thank you very much. So, I have a member of council prepared to move first reading. Councillor Daneluik.
So moved, Your Worship. Thank you.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none. All in favor? And first reading carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you. Somebody want to go grab Councillor Hendricks? All right, so that brings us to item 10, Councillors' Inquiries and Reports. Let's start with Councillor Inquiries. Do members of Council have questions of administration this evening? Councillor Van Newkirk.
Oh, thank you, Worship. Through to administration. In one of our recent mayor's columns, we had pointed out that we didn't quite hit the mark on some of the service levels on snow removal. And just wanted to see if administration could walk us through a couple of the challenges that we faced, and maybe some of the solutions that we put forward, and some of the communications we've done internally and externally to help that service level be met in the future. Thank you.
Theo.
Yes, Councillor Van Newkirk, or through the Mayor, Councillor Van Newkirk, we've reviewed our service levels with our staff, and we're pretty confident that we will continue to provide outstanding service, which they have done since the beginning of this winter. And thankfully, we're not getting a lot of snow right now, so every day we're saving money. That's something that's very important.
Especially as we hit budgets of austerity. Councillor Daneluik.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question to CEO Schweitzer. As you know, Council passed last committee meeting, council meeting regarding a bylaw effective January 1st, banning smoking in public places around Beaumont. What have we done, or where are we at with communication pieces going to the public to inform them of that's a rather significant change for some people in our community? Thank you.
Sure, and I'll refer that over to Mr. Berezowski, please.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Daneluik. So we've just completed the content this morning. The activities will start later this week, and some of the things we will be doing include posting information on beaumont.ab.ca, a social media post directing people to that, advertising in the newspaper commencing next week, as well as information on the city's electronic billboard. We will also be distributing an information sheet to Beaumont businesses, and we will also be providing content for council as well, should they get any requests for information. To follow up with that too, as we get closer to the spring season when people will be outside again and sports activities resume, we will be ramping up another round of activities and looking at opportunities there to remind people once they're back out that public trails, public parks, and outdoor sports facilities are areas where smoking is prohibited.
Thank you.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Two quick questions. Firstly, could administrators let us know where we are in the ELA report? Last time I think I asked this question, it was in the design. It had been sent away for design. Where do we sit now today?
Yes, Councillor Stout, or through the Mayor, Councillor Stout, we, I believe, spoke to the consultant this morning, and they're in the final stages of polishing up the report. Probably look at first part of January, in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, pending further revisions. Yeah, I know we gave a 2-week timeline probably 2 weeks ago, but this thing is, we want to make sure we get this right. So we have gone back to the consultant on a number of occasions, so it's what's delaying it. We're very close.
Okay, did I hear next week if there are no further revisions?
So we won't get it on the agenda next week. We have no room.
So what's that question?
Second question was, where are we with the letter to Parliament regarding the availability of e-books and e-media for the library?
Ms. Wicker?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Stout. Unfortunately, I don't have an update for Council this evening, but I will look into that tomorrow morning and send an email to Council providing an update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, just to piggyback on the snow removal discussion, if there's some way to create a more robust communication piece to the public, just outlining what expectations will be met, mainly on weekends. In terms of, I understand that we all know what the priority levels are in terms of which roads and what have you, but if there's certainly there's some things on the website, but if there's a more robust way of explaining what it is that we're doing, when we're going to do it, also technique. We have our sanding truck dropping sand with the plow up. There's obviously a technique and reason for that. Maybe more of a communication piece explaining why the speed plow is running with the plow up and the sanding out the back. Right? There's got to be reasons and probably good technical reasons, but more of a robust conversation, because I've spent a lot of time explaining that lately, and I don't have all the answers, so that would be great if there's something that could get out there to let the public know, especially for weekends. We had some snow over this weekend. A lot of the trails and you name it, continue to be subject to snow removal requests, and where to go with this. So
yeah, that's some excellent advice, and we have been actually increasing our activity on social media, and we'll take that under advisement. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no further inquiries from council, is there members of council wishing to make? Sorry, CEO wants to speak.
No. Sorry, I was jumping the gun.
It's not your turn yet. Okay. Turn. All right, is there members of council wishing to make a statement this evening? If not, I got a couple of things I'd like to just bring to council's attention. I've had a busy couple of weeks, and so there was a few things that meetings and whatnot that have gone on. So it was my pleasure in the last week of November to be able to attend the first IRTMP meeting, the Inter-Regional Transportation Master Plan meeting task force, and so. You've all seen the bulletin that's come out, and there's a second one that's going to come out this week as to what went on. That task force is well and truly underway. We're actually looking at how are we going to transport people and goods through an economic development lens to be able to bring prosperity to our region. And so looking forward to that work continuing on in the new year. I had an opportunity to meet with members of the Pastors Council to discuss bringing back the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast. And so those meetings are going to be ongoing over the next couple of weeks, and we hope to have a spring event, and so stay tuned, more details coming. We're looking at making it a real community event, and very infant stages, but like I say, look for that to come and happen in the spring. More EMRB work. Attended the Audit and Finance Committee, where we are grappling with budget cuts from the provincial government. They are reducing our grants over the next couple of years from a high of 1.75 million to, by 2023, I think it is, we'll be into a range of $1 million as the grant from the government to be able to operate. And so that shortfall will, of course, come to municipalities. So it's not really going to affect us this 2020 budget cycle, but 2021, 2022 going forward, we could be putting in some bigger bills there. Depending on the workload of the MRB as we go forward. We've had some really great discussions around strategic guidance and governance, and the CAOs are getting involved in how we're going to resource the work plan going forward. And so looking at the CAO, so it's really nice. Beaumont actually has really talented staff that contributes greatly to the regional events, and our opinions are really well respected. And it's nice to see that Beaumont is being able to take a leading role in helping our neighbors try to get the work done, because there are some pressures that are being felt by other member municipalities in terms of their capacity to do work. We as the council have put a huge stake in our regional cooperation and getting the regional work done, and so we've resourced appropriately, and we continue to resource appropriately. So those municipalities that are struggling to do things like the coal transition and money reductions, and we're more than happy to provide our expertise so that perhaps we can share as a pack. Sorry, I lost my I got to partake in a couple of really neat things over the last week too, 3 in particular. I got to, along with other members of council, attend the school at J. Lapointe where they were undergoing mock interviews. They were teaching their students how to conduct an interview in the real world. So that was great. I got to do that for 2 days. Met some really talented, really bright kids. Like, the future's bright, really smart. It was nice to see that the schools are actually teaching a life skill. And I got to be able to take part in that. So that was fun. I think Councillor Monkoff-Swain, Councillor Daneluik, and Councillor Stout were all involved in that. So that was pretty good. We got to take part today. Councillor Stout and I attended Colonial School, where we actually got to talk to all the grade 6 classes about municipal governance and what our job day to day truly is. Another group of highly motivated, very bright students that asked some really pressing questions. We did find out that we do have to come up with better answers to what is the weirdest thing you've ever had brought to a council meeting. So, because we're boring apparently. So, and then the other significant event that was really, truly, I'd hate to say it, a bit of a life-changing experience, was got to attend a blanket exercise, which really got to retrace what's happened to our Indigenous populations in the history of Canada over the history of colonization. And it was, you read about it in history books, you learn about it in school, but until you've done something like this, you probably truly don't understand it. I found it to be a really eye-opening experience. For those that don't know, we started out on a big layer of blankets, and everybody in the group was on the blankets. And as basically we recreated history. So as colonization happened and the Europeans came in and we took blankets away and consolidated, the pile-on effect that happened to the Indigenous people was just truly mind-blowing. We watched the whole group deflate as they got pushed onto reservations and sickness happened. And I'm not quite sure I'm tough enough to endure what they did. So I got killed off early. So, but yeah, it was a truly eye-opening experience, and it was really kind of humbling to take part in that. And so I'm hoping that we continue on with these initiatives to engage our Indigenous population and keep moving forward. So that's been my last couple of weeks, and so it's been really kind of interesting. So is there questions from members of council for me this evening? No? All right, now it's the CEO's turn to speak.
You gave me a couple more. I got a few items, but I'll be very quick. As far as the blanket exercise, thank you to the members of council that showed up. We had a lot of feedback from administration that was just very powerful. And as the mayor so eloquently put, like, you've got to live it to understand it or go through it to even try to understand it. We have decided to schedule another. There's enough interest within staff to go through this as well. So that's pretty. I'm pretty impressed with that. I want to welcome, and I know you can't see him on screen, and he was on a standing committee already, or a committee of the whole, but I welcome Mike Dowler, our new Chief Financial Officer. Mike comes to us from the city of Edmonton, and I know you like it when we steal good people from your neighbors, and yes, hopefully that's not recorded, right, Mike? I'm very happy to have him on board. Between Curtis and himself, just in the last, 19-20 days, have really organized, for one thing, the budget, but also looking at the systems and processes that we need. We've been growing so quickly and by so much that a lot of the basic systems and processes that you would think we would have fine-tuned are not, and that's going to be our focus for the next couple of years. So welcome, Mike, and thank you. Thank you to the mayor for the recognition of the work that is being done in the region. That extends to the councillors who are sitting on these task forces as well. If you recall, your strat plan very clearly said that we would be a player in the region, and you've provided the resources that have allowed us to do that. And I think the recognition to staff who have been looking over the table that are stepping up to fulfill that role, and I am also getting that positive feedback from folks, and they're now reaching out for us to help them. So that's a significant change. Early learning childcare. We talked about some of the changes that we needed to do from an operations perspective. In the last we talked about it, we weren't sure if the changes, we moved a couple of the rooms, we weren't sure if the changes were going to be permanent. And through a lot of hard work by a lot of people, we are happy to announce this week that the changes we have made can be permanent, and they're not going to have a whole bunch of costs associated with them. So we are bringing back the report, the final report, with no changes to it on January 14th for council. Happy to report the parents and children are happy. They're out of the, essentially, if folks don't know, is we've closed down 2 rooms in the basement and moved them up to surface, and you can imagine that's got to be a better situation for people. We are going to do some renovations, but they are building upkeep, stuff that should have been done or could have been done in years past. So there's a lot of moving parts to that one, and a very happy outcome. I'd like to report that obviously we made some significant changes to our approach to social media, and as of today, our media engagement, social media engagement, is up 300% over what it was 3 months ago, 90 days ago, in around that period. So what we're doing differently is working. Tax recovery process back in October, I believe, we brought a report to council, and council supported us continuing down the road of a very tough process that the MGA requires or allows us to do, and that is to put properties that are in arrears for 2 years, I believe it is 2 years, 5 years, sorry, 5 years up for public auction. We've done this every year. We've had 2 or 3. We brought 3 to council in October, and I'm happy to say, through a lot of hard work, that all 3 of those have now been paid up. And what I mean by hard work is you got to chase people like crazy. Typically, these are people who don't live in our city. I think we had one that did, but kudos to both council and administration for supporting that part of the MGA, because it's a tough one, but it sends a message to folks that if you're going to live in our city, you're going to pay our taxes, and we will do everything we can to help you get there. So all 3 of those are off the list and are not going to auction. Not so happy note, I suppose. Well, I definitely not so happy note, but support is being provided. As our Christmas elves this year is up probably 10% than what it was last year. We're looking at over 80 families who are needing some help. And we're here to provide that through FCSS and other volunteers in the community. In fact, if you look at our tree out in the foyer, you'll see these little tags that are requesting if you take one of the tags, and they give you instructions on you can pick up a gift for a teenager, and it'll tell you exactly what to get, and then you can put it in one of the Christmas elf boxes that are throughout the community, and the tag will show you that as well. So that's kind of neat. One other last thing, and while we were talking about the Leduc County census, Kendra was doing a little bit of homework and provided me with some updated information. In fact, the 2019 census is down over 600 people because of annexation. So the 2016 census, well done, Councillor Hendricks and Mayor Stewart, for putting that piece in the negotiation, because it benefits us, so that's kind of an interesting, fun fact. Thank you, Kendra. That's all I have.
Please don't tell the county.
I think we just did.
Having said that, there's census coming in 2020, I think, so it's all going to balance out. Okay, so there are no correspondence. So do we have any notice of motion? Councillor Daneluik.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may proceed, thank you. I move that Council instruct administration to plan an exclusive tour of the new Beaumont Sport and Recreation Centre with an executive member from all of the recreation, sports, and arts user groups in the city, and to plan a reception afterwards, members of Council. This tour is to take place before the end of March 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other notices of motion this evening? Seeing none, can I get a motion to move into camera for a closed session? Councillor Stout.
So moved, Your Worship.
All in favor? That carries unanimously, so we'll take 5 and move into closed session.